I know I'm late. You guys out there on YouTube, you've been waiting since 4 o'clock. 48 minutes now. Because I promised I'd be on the air at 4 o'clock. You've just been sitting there waiting, watching probably something on TV. And then your YouTube lit up and boom, here he is. Here's what happened. I was heading down to the shower after I did the quick warm up, heading down to the shower because I've been working out. And I got an email from a friend with a request to do a quick voiceover demo audition for a local commercial. So I had to cut that out. 30-second commercial. It was actually about 35 seconds worth of copy. Doing the demo, don't worry about the 35 seconds. Doing the real commercial, yeah, you got to worry about the 35 seconds because the TV stations are not selling you any 35-second commercial windows. It's 30. You want more? You buy a 60. They may have a 45 today. They can do almost anything, but they don't do 35s. Guarantee you that. So, yeah, why did it take more than 35 seconds? Because I had to edit it, because I couldn't read it all perfectly the first time. Because I'm not that good. I think I could do a live commercial read on a program like this where I don't really have to worry about getting it perfect, but not for an audition. Okay, so did that, then got the shower, and now here I am. So it's time to do the show. Let's do the show. I went down to the HKonJ, what is it? The historic Thousands on Jones Street. The march on Saturday. I'll talk about that in a minute after I get the show started. The thing I wanted to say here as I'm warming it up is that I handed out a bunch of my Triangle Talk Show business cards to people lining the sidewalks. And I said, watch the show, listen to the show. And but I realized, I guess I better do a show. So they'd have something to watch. And now they're going, there he is. There's that guy we saw on Fayetteville Street, not Jones Street, Fayetteville Street. He looks a little taller in person. Guess I do. From the studio in the bonus room above the garage on the north side of Cary, at the foot of Mount Belzoni, this is the Triangle Talk Show. We are at episode 49. I'm labeling this Activism, February 11th, 2019. The Antique Activist. And that's me, Gary Pierce. A genuine antique activist, or perhaps just an activist wannabe. We'll figure that out in the course of this program. It's just going to be me. Nobody else here. Cindy's not even here. She's down in Charlotte helping out her folks, as she needs to do quite often these days. And I didn't go round up anybody else, so I guess it's just going to be me. So the antique activist. Well, yeah, something has activated me. I'm not sure quite what. This year, well, a lot of it has to do with doing the show. If I want to be a political animal, I guess I need to go prowl the political woods a little bit and go play. So I have been. I volunteered to help out with the Women's March. Got a little footage from that. I haven't had a chance to play it yet because the day after, it wrapped up about 4 o'clock or so. I threw a bunch of stuff in a suitcase and climbed on an airplane and went out skiing for a week. Beautiful week of skiing. And and then got back and lots of stuff to do. And then I wasn't volunteering for it, but I participated. I marched in the HKonJ, the historic Thousands on Jones. I had heard the HKonJ in the past. It was sponsored by the NAACP, but they had a couple of hundred other groups that were participating. I think they said 200. It's pretty impressive. I knew there were a lot of usually progressive liberal groups around the area. Some of that 200, I think they probably have about 50 people in them or 5 people in them. You want to start a progressive group, you can start one. We're okay. We're okay with that. Anybody can play. So I marched in that just as a a marcher, a person walking down the street with a bunch of other folks in a group that I'm part of. So, serious activism this year. And as I said, I handed out some of my Triangle Talk Show business cards. So here's the show. I'm the guy who coughs a lot. I have respiratory issues. Still working on fixing them. In 1968, I lived in the Chicago suburbs. 1968, I was 18 years old. I was prime, cannon fodder in Vietnam. And I didn't go. I got a draft deferment, student deferment. No bone spurs, just school. And then about the time that was going to, they started the lottery thing. And my lottery number was just high enough that they never called it before Nixon shut down Vietnam and the draft. So I got out of that, but mostly it was because I was in school. 1968, I was wrapping up my last year of high school. Well, what should have been my last year of high school. Should have been. Turns out I had to put in a few classes in 1969 as well. I have explained this before. I was a terrible high school student. I spent 5.5 years in high school. Graduated with an F+. Just they wanted to get me out of there. They probably thought I was trying to do a draft dodging thing. That was not what was on my mind. What was on my mind was, I don't know how to do this. Whatever you're asking me to do here in high school, I don't know how. So they finally graduated me with an F+, and I did better in college. But first I went to disc jockey for a few months. That I grew up in that few months and went to college as an adult. 1968, the summer of 68, and I was probably doing summer school, I'm sure I was, but there was the Democratic Convention in Chicago and the huge protests that took place in a area that I now am very familiar with because I lived right across from it, Grant Park, so right along the lakefront, right along downtown. As a suburban kid, I wasn't that familiar with downtown. I had been down there a few times, but I didn't know the territory real well. I was also not a progressive, and I don't think the word progressive even existed back then. I think you were a liberal, but I was not. I was in the thrall of a bunch of arch conservatives, John Birch types, some somewhat older folks that I hung around with and some other kids that I hung around with. And although I didn't understand any of that very well, I didn't understand that any better than I understood the stuff that I was supposed to be learning in high school. That's as political as I was getting, that's where it was coming from. So the Democratic Convention and the stuff that was going on there, that wouldn't have been my thing. But nevertheless, it was happening, and I could have hopped on a train. Well, I was 18, I had a car. I could have driven down there. I could have hopped on a commuter train and gone to see it, but I didn't. I saw what you saw as on the news And here's, I'm sure this is just some, old news footage from someplace. This is what was going on. Look at those radicals. Their collared shirts and their relatively short hair. And here come the police. This is a night video, so it's a little bit hard to see. And there's a bunch of shots that are cut together from, who knows how disparate. But the police in their blue uniforms and their blue helmets, not wearing riot gear because police didn't have riot gear back then. And then they bring in the paddy wagon and they start beating students or kids or whatever with billy clubs, wham, and hauling them off. And then I think there's going to be some tear gas or smoke or something that shows up here. I could have been in all that. I got a feeling most of the people that were involved were more peripheral to all of that. You had to be in just the right place where the TV cameras were pointing to see that. And then there's the crowds that are running like crazy. All this footage looks familiar. This is the whole world's watching stuff. That if we were around and some folks sitting up on a tree, good spot, good vantage point. A kid trying to punch a cop, cop beating the kid. Okay, so I could have been there, but I wasn't. And I'm pretty sure I saw it on TV watching the news, but I was not a news hawk. Not by any stretch of the imagination at that time. I liberaled up shortly after that. College will do that to you. Reading Upton Sinclair and probably a few other books. Not the marketing books that I was reading. Not the business books. They were teaching me about how putting better lighting in a Westinghouse plant improved productivity. I sort of remember that. Okay, so I liberaled up and but really didn't do anything about it. Didn't join any protests or anything. The closest I came in my time in Chicago to doing anything that was protest or politically inspired was during some elections. I was in this ham radio club, and we had ham radio stuff in our cars. And we had, I got one here. These walkie-talkie things that most people didn't have. This is before cell phones. Before most people could do more than, you could have a CB radio. That would be about it. Otherwise, your ability to communicate, I like this line, I heard it someplace, your ability to communicate went as far as you could shout. And we could talk, of course we could talk around the world with the ham radio stuff, but more specific to this event, we could talk around the city. We could drive around and talk to anybody else anywhere in the city, like a taxi cab, like a police radio. This was the late 1970s now. Chicago had the reputation for being a political nightmare. The Daily Machine, Democratic Party, Daily Machine, being corrupt and throwing elections. Excuse me. And so this group called the LEAP, group of lawyers, Legal Elections in All Precincts, was formed. And what they did was that they organized poll watchers to go to the Chicago polling places, especially the ones that were likely to have trouble. And if they saw something happening, document it and call a central number, and LEAP would dispatch a lawyer who had more legal training and could go in and document what's going on. And I don't know if they were going to step in the middle of things or not. But what they lacked was the ability to respond quickly. If they were sitting in their headquarters, they could be 30 minutes away from the polling place where something was going to go on. So they could use the ability to circulate in cars around the area. But how do you talk to them? Two-way radios were not something most people had, but we did. We ham radio guys. We had them. So we became the taxi cabs for LEAP. We put a radio in their 3 headquarters spots scattered around the city. Phone call would come in. Somebody would answer it, get the information, hand a note to us ham people, being basically taxi dispatchers, and we would find out what car was closest and give them the address and a little bit of information about what was going on, and off they went. I don't know if that really helped anything, but it felt good. That was my activism in the 1970s. Didn't get more active in the 1980s until I think about 1989. In 1989, I left Chicago. I had disc jockeyed a little bit in Arizona, decided it was time to go get a real job again, and briefly got a video editing job in Knoxville, Tennessee. So I lived there for 4 or 5 months, last half of 1989. And in 1989, the Equal Rights Amendment was being pushed, and there was a rally in Knoxville for that. And I went. I'm sure I had opportunities to do things like that before, and I've had plenty of opportunities here. And I never went, never got over my own, sluggishness, laziness. I also thought it'd be kind of weird to go to those things. I didn't know why. It's like I didn't know anybody. Wouldn't be going with part of a group. Would just go to kind of stand around and see what was going on. And that's pretty much what I did in Knoxville, except for one little thing. I don't really remember how this happened, but somehow there was a TV station that was shooting video, and there was a little protest group against the ERA that I was standing next to, and somehow they pointed the microphone and camera at me and said, "Well, what do you think?" And I said, I think these people are just opposed to sex." Kind of a dumb thing to say. Don't think the people that are running the rally would be happy to have that be the thing that got on television, but it was. It wasn't the only thing, but it was. Sorry, ERA. Sorry, Knoxville. So then I got here in 1990, and between then and now, I've saw things, saw announcements for things, rallies, and Moral Monday marches and Tuesdays with Tillis, and there's all kinds of things going on you could get involved in, but I hadn't. Started this show and thought, well, this show was born from the idea that I saw a lot of hope and energy and excitement and the possibility of protesting something worthwhile after Trump was elected and the day after he was inaugurated, then the Women's March in 2017. And I thought that was pretty cool. And what could I do to participate in it? What could I do to add to that? What could I do to help keep it going? And that was start a podcast. Well, sure, Gary. What a great idea. Do a podcast. Don't work too hard. Don't get out of breath. Well, that's what I'm doing. But then this year, or tail end of last year, I started volunteering at an abortion clinic as an escort. And that's pretty cool. And has given me some contacts. So I found out about the Women's March, which I knew that they were going to do. But I found out about the organizing committee, so I went and volunteered to help out with that. My job was to secure the porta potties. I got those. And I gave them some radio communication help. And did a couple of other things. Chore type things. Glad to help out. And then I saw the notice for the HKonJ, and I went and do that, which reminded me I was supposed to get some pictures up here, so just bear with me for a moment, and I'll get my pictures ready. I think I stuffed them in a Google album. Yeah, okay, there we go. Be ready for that. Okay, so I am the accidental activist. I'm the antique. I'm not the oldest activist there is. I mean, there's plenty of older people than me out there doing this stuff. I'm 69. Pretty much a young pup. You know, Bernie Sanders is a lot older than me. So I'm enjoying being the activist. I don't know if you had a thought about doing that at all. Those of you that are watching because I gave you the business card, of course, you were down there at the HKonJ, and that's where you saw me. Everybody else, don't know. It's not as hard as I thought it would be. You just go. It's not even that hard to park. You go, you walk around, maybe meet some people, maybe find some stuff that you want to get involved in. So let's be activists. Antique wannabe or not. I'm going to play a little of the footage. I shot some video at the Women's March. I just took still pictures at HKonJ, but I shot some video at the Women's March. I think this is I edited a little bit. It's about 12 minutes long. And I'll talk to you about what I saw when I was doing that. Oh, push the right button here. There's the button that's got this. There we go. So this is where, and again, apologize to the folks in the audio audience. We're just looking at the field that is the Halifax Mall. Big empty grassy field surrounded by some government buildings.
We have 3 officers that are mobile patrol. Okay. In the event that we have lost children, we have somebody that needs emergency medical
attention. This is our marshals talking to one of the Capitol Police guys.
Make contact with them.
Okay, my name is Carrie. I'm going to be the marshal leader for I'm not sure why.
So Carrie was a marshal leader. Some folks that I worked with,
we are going to go to my right.
Their job was to help direct the people who were going to be doing the march. And then we walked around the perimeter of the legislative building just to get an idea what the march was going to be like. And it's still a little time before the march was going to get started, and in that time, a whole bunch of community organizations were setting up their tables along the edge of the Halifax Mall. There's what they call a selfie station. Take your picture against that background, the Women United for Justice. This is somebody's office in the legislative building. It says, "We stand for women, stand with women." And this is where the march actually was going to get started. It's right in front of the legislative building, the General Assembly's building. And march was going to start at 1 o'clock. At about 12:30, it didn't look like very many people were there, but then they started to pour in. A lot of them were across the street. The events going on across the street, primarily the African American Cultural Celebration and the Museum of History. The Raging Grannies, everybody seemed to want to take a picture with them. We invited the media, and the media showed up. It was one of the TV stations interviewing, I think, a friend of mine. And some folks gathered directly in front of the legislative building. Some folks started off in the Halifax Mall, and these folks are walking over to find the start of the march. Tiny men need big walls. The signs are great. The signs are always great. Another TV crew. I think that's Galia, president of Now. Channel 11 had their helicopter up watching the whole thing. And this is how the crowd looked as they were getting to fill in the space in front of the legislative building. And then something happened. not quite sure what, but the best story I got is that the police asked people to move back and make some more room, and that accidentally got the march started for a lot of people the wrong way on the wrong sidewalk. And that's these people here. They're going the wrong way. I tried to head them off around the other side of the legislative building. I was too late. And then some other people got started down on the sidewalk. They were also going the wrong direction around the legislative building. And other folks got started the right direction, and the folks that went into the mall, they started walking back out, and they were all trying to converge on this corner, and that was going to be a mess. So they all just kind of ran into each other. And then this lady on top of the pedestrian bridge between the legislative building and the mall was just hollering at people, and somehow she got them turned around. Okay, so I'm going to see a little footage from Channel 11. This is what the march looked like. As it totally encircled, and everybody got going the right direction, totally encircled the legislative building, all the way around it on the sidewalks. And then I found the beginning of it as it got sort of reconstituted and coming back around the building, and the coordinator said, "Gary, you lead them." Me? I'm a guy. Cop told me to tell him to try to fill in quickly into the grassy field, because otherwise they're going to get very jammed up at the exit to the bridge. But that wasn't a big problem. Everybody kept on going. If you look, tell you what, I'm going to make that stop. If you look carefully, this is the helicopter footage from Channel 11. For those of you that are watching the picture, this guy, that's me. This is the leading edge of the march as it's working its way back on the proper direction. And that's me. And a moment ago, the cop told me, tell him to keep moving into the grass and not stop. So you'll see me try to do that in just a second here. And it's kind of cool because below the bridge, you can still see people marching. So it's in a real long line. The folks below the bridge still pretty much filling the sidewalk around the legislative building and now into the mall. And there I am. You'll see me wave in a second. And I realized it was kind of futile. And I needed to shoot some video. There I am. That's me. By the way, Channel 11, I didn't ask you for permission to use this, but you used my picture, so I think I can claim a little bit of right to use it. Okay, lots of folks still coming across the bridge that goes between the legislative building and the mall, and still on the sidewalk. Filling in the mall. Not nearly everybody's in there yet. A little bit of space to sit down, but most people were going to be standing. Still pouring in across the bridge. It's going to be pretty impressive. And then one final shot from the Channel 11 helicopter of pretty much everybody's in there and gathering up around the stage.
What are you trying to achieve today? Why do you want to come out?
I'm marching today for change, and I disagree with a lot of policies.
Yeah, it's Channel 11 interviewing another friend that I've met in organizing this thing. And there's what the crowd looks like if you were up on the stage. They're just about to get started.
Ladies, non-binary folk and allies, welcome to the Women's March. Woo!
I'm getting used to the concept of non-binary folk.
Was one of the women who pulled down the statue in Durham. So everybody go, yeah!
We're looking from in the crowd now. This is not continuous footage. So the speakers and the entertainment continued on the stage, and in the meantime, on the periphery, there were these approximately 40 tables from people. And they were recruiting, talking to people. You wondered about an organization. They had somebody there that you could talk to. Stronger NC. This is the table for the organizers of the march themselves. Something called You Can Vote. Raleigh voter registration drive. This is Women's Choice Clinic. It's where I volunteer. Moms Demand Action. The Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Raleigh. They provided a preacher for my wedding. We Heart Our Educators. I'm not quite sure what that is. Lillian's List. North Carolina Now. And then double dipping, the National Now group. Side by side. League of Women Voters.
We need it alive, well, and publicized.
The ERA is alive and well?
Yes, it's alive.
I remember that from like the 80s.
And I still have the necklace to boot.
So what does it take to get it finished?
What does it take to get it finished? We need more states to ratify. And North Carolina had the opportunity in the past. It didn't pass. Now we've got another chance to be the necessary next state so that Congress can revisit whether we're going to put this in the Constitution.
I don't know who she was, but she was the only interview that I did, and it was an accidental interview because she just started talking to me because I had the camera there. Human Rights Campaign, People Power, Friends of the Earth, Muslim Women For, and I couldn't quite read what that banner says, but I'm sure they're for something worthwhile. School Test Reform, I think. Planned Parenthood. Apex Democrats. I've heard of many of these. Some of them I haven't. V-Day Raleigh, a movement to stop violence against women and girls. VDay.com. VDayRaleigh.com. No, .org. Women NC. Let's Raise a Generation. It's gone. Wolfpack.com. And that's not the wolf pack you're thinking of. It's not the sports group. It's a political action committee, I think, opposing gerrymandering, and I swapped some email with them and gave out cards at just about every one of these tables, and I'm kind of hoping that they'll respond to me, and the Wolfpack folks have, so they'll be on the show sometime, not too far. And now we're just wading back into the crowd and listening to the speakers.
That are working across the aisle and more willing to compromise to find solutions.
Pretty impressive to be in a crowd like that. There's probably about 2,000 people there.
Women who find a way to get the job done.
And finally, you can continue to demand change.
The next speaker.
Let your representatives right here at the General Assembly know that you want to end the money bail system that traps so many of our neighbors in a vicious cycle of poverty. There's a second chance.
They had people talking on a variety of topics. This woman was talking about how bail and the need to put up money for bail is anti-poor people, which it certainly is.
As women, we will show what a humane, civilized, and moral society looks like.
And back out in the middle of the crowd, just walking through them.
Let me leave you with one last powerful truth, and it's this. They call black women minorities. They call Latino women minorities. They call Muslim women minorities. And they call poor white women minorities. But together, we are the majority.
That is true. Yep, they are the majority. So I was really excited, proud, happy to be part of the Women's March. There were not a lot of men volunteering. There were a few. Wasn't the only one. But it was mostly women putting things on. And I was real happy to be part of that. So that was just a few weeks ago. Seems like forever ago now. Just a couple of weeks ago. And then went out skiing and came back. And the next weekend, just last Saturday, was this HKonJ. Again, historic, thousands on Jones. And as I'm thinking about the name, I'm not entirely clear on how they came up with that. And it would be great to have a representative from the group, an AACP. Sooner or later, we'll get somebody on the show. Maybe I can ask at that point. But all I can do right now is make a little bit of fun of it because it's not that historic. It started in 2005. Thousands, probably yes. And on Jones, well, Jones Street is where the legislative building is, but the march was mostly on Fayetteville Street, and it stopped at the south end of the state capitol. And I got some pictures to show. Again, just in the middle of this for me, and I was walking along with the NARAL, the abortion rights group. Let's see, can I make that full screen? Yeah, there we go. This is toward the beginning. You walk in, join the march, and it occurs to me that when I was telling you a little bit about how the things got going the wrong direction at the Women's March, if you're an attendee, a marcher, you just follow whoever's in front of you, and it is so easy for things to go wrong. I had one of my jobs was to make up some maps showing the direction you'd be walking around the legislative building. And I'll probably do that again next year, and I'll probably try to do a better job. I don't know where the march will be next year. I'm sure they would do something next year. This was successful, but I saw a lot of people looking at their phones with quizzical expressions on their faces at the south end of the Halifax Mall, where the bridge is over to the legislative building, trying to figure out where they're supposed to go. So I know I need to do a better job in making up the map to tell people where to go. But even so, even if you'd looked at the map and then you saw people going a different way by the hundreds, you would follow them. So that's the lesson that I learned, both as part of working on the Women's March and then just being here in the HKonJ. I wasn't sure where we were going or what we were doing, but we were going. Just joined in. Again, lots of different groups. I think they talked about 200 different groups. From this shot, you can see we're working our way up toward the Capitol buildings in the distance. I think we started on Wilmington, crossed over, and then ended up on Fayetteville Street. A little bit closer to the Capitol, and you can actually see the stage where all the folks are going to be talking. Pointed my camera backwards. They filled up the street from the Capitol for about a block to the south. And again, I would estimate about 2,000 people. The story in the newspaper and the News and Observer said hundreds. It's hard to get crowd estimates. But I just kind of eyeballing it, I would say at least 1,000, closing 2,000. It has been bigger in the past. So has the Women's March. The participation in getting people out to these events is dropping off some. This picture is from the back of the stage. I went around to the front. One of the speakers is talking. And this is from the back of the audience, or the back of the march, which is all filling in the one street. Okay, so if you're watching, you can see we're at Hargett Street, so one block up to the Capitol on Wilmington, and it filled up that space. A couple more pictures from alongside. You weren't standing shoulder to shoulder with people. There was room to walk, but it was pretty crowded. So three pictures here from looking up at the stage on the left, kind of in the middle, and then toward the back, and you can see where the back is. So another takeaway, and AACP has been doing this longer than the Women's March. Women's March started 3 years ago. This is 17, 18 years old, and they got a lot more money to spend. So some of the things that I can tell from being part of it is they've got a big video display and much bigger sound system spread out all around Fayetteville Street. A much bigger stage. So a lot more infrastructure and a lot more porta potties. Excuse me. And get back to the stage again here. I can tell that they, unless they got a lot of things donated, I can tell that they had a lot. Oh, I wasn't showing any of that. Good job, Gary. There we go. A view of the stage and the big monitor. I could use a technical director. Anybody want to volunteer? So they had a lot more money to spend on their infrastructure, unless they got a lot of volunteer donations. So I don't know. There were donations, plenty of donations made to the Women's March, but we couldn't have a big video monitor. We didn't have a giant stage, and we had the most audio support that we could get, but it was just kind of barely adequate. But about the same number of people showing up at both events, a couple of thousand. So interesting. I made the joke to some folks that I was marching with in the HKonJ and said, well, clearly that shows that the Women's March was more efficient. A lot more money, a lot less money spent, about the same number of people. They said, no, don't even think that. We were not efficient. We started kind of late. We scrambled to get things put together. It went off very well, but it was a last-minute scramble. We kind of hoping this year we'll do better. It's something that I noticed. I was looking through some video, some interviews from the previous women's marches in Raleigh, and the women that organized it were mostly not part of the group this year. It was mostly folks that were not at the top echelons of organizing. They were participating, but they kind of graduated up to running the show. And of course, many of us, like me, were doing it for the first time. So kind of learning how this worked from the ground up. I hope a lot of them will come for next year. We'll have a seasoned crew, and once again, as a guy, I'm not responsible for running the show. I just do some of the grunt work. I'll go get the porta potties again. No, I don't have to clean the porta potties, fortunately for me. Okay, what else? There was something else I wanted to talk about. But I need to make my Google Photos go away. Come on, Google Photos. Go away. Okay, the show is slowly winding down to a crawl because I can't get the Google Photos off of my screen, and there's something behind them that I need to see. Maybe not. No, I think I screwed up. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah. No, I think I totally screwed up. Let me try this. Let me try this again. Google Photos, go away. I need a technical director. Well, I kind of lost what I was. All of the stuff that I was working with has gone away. I can get back. It's just going to take a moment. Because I wanted to talk about what's going on in Virginia. Give me my show notes back. See you folks that were talking to me on the side of the street getting my business card. You're now going, what? What did this guy invite us to? This is the stupidest show I've ever watched. All right, so up in Virginia, the Democratic Party is still in trouble. Got Governor Ralph Northam, Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax. Northam, of course, the trouble he's in stemmed from a racist picture of a Klan, a guy dressed up in Klan outfit next to a guy in blackface, both white people, probably. Well, the guy in the Klan outfit, can't tell. Probably white guy. And that was in his yearbook picture, and now he says, well, he doesn't know how it got there, but it wasn't him. Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax, who's a black guy, is accused now by 2 women of sexual assault. And initially, the timing and everything was, and where the charge came from that reached the public was sketchy. But the women have come forward, and their story sounds credible. And then finally, Attorney General Mark Herring, and these are the 3 people in line for the governor's job. I mean, the guy who's got it, Northam. Fairfax, who's the lieutenant governor, next second in line. Third in line, or second in line, is Attorney General Mark Herring, and he came out and sort of proactively said, "Oh yeah, I got a little blackface in my history as well." I don't think we've seen his picture, but he said he did it. And there have been calls from high-ranking people in the Democratic Party, including some presidential candidates, for all of them to resign. The problem with that is that the next guy in line is a Republican, and that would leave a Republican in charge of the state as governor, and that becomes a little hard for the Democrats to swallow. So everybody's kind of taking a slowdown on that. Wait and see. Let's see what develops. None of them, Northam, Fairfax, Herring, none of them are saying they're going to resign. They're all saying they're not going to resign. It's awkward. The Republican punditry is having, of course, a field day on all of it. They're having a great time. And it was where do you end up? When I was talking to Elizabeth Crudup about this a week ago, I guess, she's thinking, well, Northam's got to go. Herring hadn't come out yet, and she had helped campaign for Fairfax, so she wasn't so sure about him. And of course, she's a black woman, and I'm a white guy, and I think that is a real serious part of the issue. How you feel about it sort of depends on where you're coming from on that, on each of those issues. I was having trouble, and still am having trouble, ginning up a lot of outrage for blackface pictures because it's never been a thing for me. I'm trying to recognize the empathy, or sometimes some empathy that can be hard for me to generate. With how black people feel about that. I have talked to a few other black people and looked at polls of just population in general, and it does seem pretty mixed. Some of the black people that I talked to, I don't know a lot, I only know a few, was kind of we're offended, but we're not hang the guy offended. Not boot him out of office offended. And then I did the show that was with Elizabeth. It was how old, how bad, how sure. 3 questions that I'll start with when asking about these scandals. And as it comes down to me, if you're asking me how I feel about it, Northam, pretty old, bad enough, and not very sure. A lot of people say they're sure, but nobody really knows except him and maybe a few other people that really know that picture. And I don't think that that's a fire and offense. He's trying to pull it out of the fire and make some a learning, teachable moment out of it. That doesn't sound really that doesn't strike me as being really genuine. You know, it's just something he and all of the people around him are trying to put together to minimize the damage. Some of it's going to be real. Some of it, I think, is just political spin. But and when I watched his news conference, one of the things that I realized after I was done with the show with Elizabeth was, in his news conference, he was really, aw shucks, you know, I'm just a country boy. He didn't say that, but he was trying to come across that way. You know, definitely, you know, the mayor of Mayberry, not the governor of Virginia. I was thinking as I was watching it, well, he didn't seem like he had a lot of guile. He seemed fairly sincere. He was doing I did the little shoe polish on my cheeks because of the Michael Jackson thing. And the reason I'm telling you that is because I really remember that. And because I really remember that, and it was about the same time in my life as this other picture should have been from, and I don't remember that. So that's why I'm telling you about the Michael Jackson and the shoe polish, because I really remember that. So that's the story he was trying to put forth, and sticking to it. And that seemed genuine to me. And then looking afterwards at it afterwards, it was a little bit too much. Oh, shucks, I'm just a country boy. A governor should be a little sharper than that. He's still saying that he was just overwhelmed by the moment. And that's why he apologized for it initially and pretty much immediately, and then had to back off the apology later on, saying, you know, I thought about this a little more. I looked at her art and talked to some people, and I don't think that's me. Badly handled. But I'm still saying not a firing offense. I think, considering the rest of his public life, the things that he has done, he's done a few things that have progressives unhappy with him. But for the most part, he seems to have done a pretty good job politically of being on the right side of justice. So we'll see. Fairfax. 2 women, seemingly pretty credible. You know, if we're looking back at Kavanaugh, if we're looking at some of the other folks that have been run out of town, run out of their jobs, run out of office, based on allegations from seemingly credible women, or, in Kavanaugh's case, appointed to the Supreme Court, in spite of a lot of input from a very credible woman. So Fairfax sits there with that kind of allegation against him. And these things don't tend to go to court very much. At this level, they are judged in the court of public opinion. The court of public opinion does not require innocence until proven guilty. It's whatever we feel like banging our gavel for. Fairfax is probably not going to go to jail for it. Will he get enough pressure? And there are people talking about starting impeachment proceedings. Impeachment against Northam for having a picture in his yearbook, that's a stretch. Impeachment against Fairfax for having credible allegations of sexual abuse, possible. Herring, I haven't seen him talk, but it sounds like, let me get out in front of this. And, I did some blackface as well. And of course, now blackface pictures are coming out from college yearbooks across the country from that era, including that 1979 Yakety Yak at UNC with some pretty outrageous stuff in it. And then the news story that said from the editor of the yearbook, yeah, I thought that was going to get some heat. I just didn't think it would take 40 years to gather that heat. Okay. There is no defense for us clueless white people for doing that, other than to say We didn't get it back then. And many of us have learned some important lessons, and we understand, black people, that you were offended then and we didn't pay attention to you, and you are offended now and we are paying attention to you. And if you say you want some heads to roll because of this, we understand that. And don't know exactly what to do about it, but not all the heads are going to roll. Maybe some of them. I could hang on to Herring. Fairfax, I think, is going to be in pretty big trouble. And it's awkward. It's bad because he's the black guy in this trio. Northam and Herring are white guys, kind of old white guys. Fairfax is a young black guy. One of the things Elizabeth was talking about is, well, of course you're going to point the finger at the young black guy because that's just another stereotype. And it could be. This is a terrible thing about the reality of these allegations, is that proof is almost impossible to come by. Very hard, very rare to get documentary evidence. You can get some contemporaneous evidence of what people wrote down or what they said to people. But you're getting good, hard smoking gun evidence. That's pretty hard. So for me, anyway, one of the big ideas about believe the women, believe their stories, do a reasonable amount of verification, but for the most part, give them the benefit of the doubt, because all of the time until now, the benefit of the doubt has gone to the perpetrator, usually the guy, because in the absence of proof, the woman's story is discounted. I'm sorry, you sound credible, but you got no proof. So the guy goes free or unpunished or whatever. Well, at the level of you and me, that's still going to be the case, because all we got is the police and maybe the courts. And if we can't get DNA evidence out of a rape kit, assuming they ever get tested, and find a perpetrator that matches it, and then go get beyond somehow what Justin Fairfax is saying is, yeah, I had a sexual encounter with these women, but it was consensual. They said it was okay. Now they're saying it's not. And he's being as nice as he can, or maybe as nice as political expediency is leading him to be. I can't tell. Saying, I don't want to call her a liar. I don't want to discount her experience. We just see things very differently, and there's no reconciling that. Well, we'll see. Again, at that level, the decision on what's going to happen to someone is rendered more in the court of public opinion. And if he loses his job, it's probably, it may be through impeachment, but it's more likely through pressure to resign. And it's not going to be because the court told him he had to. If something like that were to happen to me, end up in court, maybe, and talk to a judge. So it's messy. It's kind of interesting to watch. Other events are slowly beginning to push it off the front page. It may get pushed off so far that we just stop paying attention to it before there's a real clear resolution. It'll be, the folks in Virginia are going to pay attention to it longer than the rest of the country. But it may just kind of peter out, and that, I'm pretty sure, is what Northam, Fairfax, and Herring are hoping for. That it leaves the front page, and there'll still be some people trying to make some noise about it, but they're not going to get much traction. We'll see. Or it could blow up. Well, we will see. What else here? A few other stories I was going to bring up. I think I'm going to hang on to them for another show. Yeah, don't see anything else I really wanted dig into from my list of things to talk about right now. So I think I'm just going to wrap it up. It's dinner time. The cats want some food. And so do I. So let's go do that. It's episode 49, Activism. I've activated myself. February 11th, 2019. I am the antique activist. I am Gary Pierce. And it's been a pleasure doing a show with you today. Were we on? Yeah, it looks like we were on. And now, we're off. Over and out.